What's good?
What's popping? What's shaking, guys? It's Frequency Response. Back, episode 2.
We're back at it.
You know, we didn't quit yet. DJ Gates here. Open the gates.
You can call me Rob. Robert. What up?
Billy. Yeah. Robbie.
Robbie. Bobby.
Bobby. Oh, wait. Smoothie Pants.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Smoothie Pants.
Evidently, his pants look like smoothies. But you're making a straight blueberry smoothie, so I don't know what the hell that means. Anyway. Frequency Response. We're here to just, inform the people, inform the newly founded engineers, production people who just bought laptops, people who just got Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton, Machine, anything. You want to know how to do some stuff. You're making some loops. They sound all right, but you're trying to make them things slap, trying to make the bass hit, trying to get them frequencies up here,
That's
not
right.
down here or down here.
Mm.
So, yeah, we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, we kind of just started from the basics.
Basics.
Told us about, we talked about your start in music, rapping, producing, now getting more into engineering. Myself, been engineering for like almost 10 years now. Been out in LA for like 6. Just built the new stew. We're in the new stew. I've had a lot of clients coming through, a lot of new people, a lot of repeat clients. Let's just check in since we talked last. What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? I've been working on the beat tape.
Beat tape. All right.
Beat tape. I also made a house song.
Oh.
No one knows about.
Some vocals or what?
No vocals.
Okay, I might need to get some vocals on that.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah. All right. House track. Cool. You're working on the beat tape with somebody else, right?
Yeah, correct.
What's
His Instagram is Big Eared Bandits. His name is Jose. Shout out to you.
Big Ear Bandits. What's up? Dope. So yeah, you guys are just kind of working on a couple. How many tracks is it going to be, or do you know yet?
We're aiming for 7.
Okay.
So right now we're just kind of creating.
So you're dropping. So as a producer, you drop beat tapes for what reason? For people who don't know.
Well, honestly, it was his idea. Because me personally, I was dropping a beat once a week.
Yep.
Up until I started getting clients and then having to mix and having to do other things.
Yep.
So it was his idea, really. He was like, let's make a beat tape just last week. I had a Zoom call with him.
So are the intentions to like just kind of, 1, to get the beat out there, but 2, to kind of get artists to hear your beats and stuff like that, so you can, get some more clients as far as like production?
If I had to be honest, not really on the getting more clients.
Okay.
Just to give music to the people.
So the next question, do you listen to a lot of instrumentals? Like while you're studying or while you're working on stuff, or like background music, like a lot of people just kind of have like the lo-fi hip-hop radio station, it's just like smooth beats in the background.
I don't have Spotify anymore. That's where I used to listen to my music.
Yeah.
So right now, I honestly been on YouTube, and the song I've been on right now is Summer Nights.
He's been singing that since he got here.
Summer Nights.
Is that a sample or something?
What's up?
Is it a sample?
What do you mean?
Or is it a straight up song?
It's a straight up song. Lonnie Liston. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Lonnie Listen, sure.
Super nice.
I really fuck with the lo-fi like channel on YouTube. Like that shit's bangs.
With the girl studying?
Yeah. I mean,
Hey.
that's just like great thing to put on when you're like cleaning or like doing whatever. But yeah. So we've been working.
What you been up to? Let the people know what you been up to.
Man.
This
So I
week.
shot some photos for the new studio, posted them up, getting some new clients, doing some sales outreach. It's important to reach out to people, let them know that you're there to help them. You got to remind them, because there's a lot of artists that do this shit themselves, and they're good at it. They could be better, and also it kind of like, if you take that workload off of the artists, their art might get even better. You know what I mean? Because they're not like weighed down by the responsibilities of like, oh, okay, I got to mix this myself and put it out, So I've been recently just reaching out to artists that I've worked with a couple times. I'm not like their regular engineer, but I want to be. So just been reaching out to people, letting them know I'm still here, letting them know I got the new studio. If they need anything, invite them through, remind them what I can do, So that's been good. Let's see. Yeah, so I've been working with my friend Vanessa Michaels and one of her artists, Luck. I've been working with this dude, Javin, who I've known I mixed his first record, it had been probably like 4 years ago. And then I just kind of followed on my Instagram since. And then he just moved to LA. He's from Philly.
Hey.
And I hit him up and I was like, yo, come check out the new studio. He came through, recorded 3 songs.
Whoa.
Shit's fire. He's really good. So yeah, I'm working with him, and then I just got back with my boy Reggie Beckton. We were in the studio a couple of days ago working on his new album, cutting in like a feature on his album. Yeah, man, been busy. So
Well, I think it's a good segue right now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about studio etiquette.
yeah, man. So like, I'm big on vibes, like energy, you know, because I feel like when you're making art, you kind of have to be in a good place, you know. You can't be frustrated. You can't be. I mean, sometimes you can be having a bad day and like write a good song, you know. But for the most part, you want to be relaxed, a little happy, you know.
Yeah.
And then like the environment in your room is really important. Like, you know, we talked about like if you're cramped in a bedroom, you're cramped in like a really small room, and there's a lot of clutter and it's dirty, and it just kind of fucks with your psyche a little bit, right? Like,
I feel so.
yeah. So being in like a bigger open space, not a lot of clutter, keep it clean, because especially when artists are coming to your space, because to you, like, you could be like, oh, this isn't messy to me. This is just kind of like how I usually am. But you never know how the other person lives. Like, they might be a very clean person.
Right.
So they pull up to your studio and they're like afraid to touch stuff, you know?
Right.
So they're just like, fuck. So they don't feel comfortable, you know? They can't sit back and like lay on the couch and write shit, or, you know what I mean? So that's important. Keep your studio clean. Honestly, with all the COVID stuff now, wipe down your headphones, wipe down your pop filters, anything, door handles on the booth. Like, I make sure I do that because I have different people coming through. It's good to be cautious. So yeah, vibes are very important. Same thing like when they're recording, you know, like I feel like one reason I don't prefer to charge hourly to artists that I really believe in is because I don't want people to feel rushed. I don't want someone to come in and be like, oh man, I only have an hour to like lay this whole song down because that's all I can afford, you know?
Right.
So I would rather charge you just to mix the project, and then like if you're a fairly quick worker, like you can get a song done in like 4 hours, like I don't want to like limit you to just an hour or two. So I work with artists like that, whatever they're comfortable with, because you know, if you don't get a good recording, the mixing process is a bitch. You know what I mean?
That's true.
So I'd rather get that recording perfect, and then my job is way easier.
Everyone's job's easier at that point.
So I mean, have you had any experiences with like bad vibes in the studio, or like
Me, I would say if I smoke weed,
yeah,
I could be a little thrown off.
okay,
I get in my head.
Yeah.
And then if artists are around and I'm in my head, they feel that shit.
for sure,
And it's just not a good vibe.
yeah,
So that was on me. That's my fault. That's why I try not to smoke when
Yeah.
I'm trying to record people.
yeah.
And I'm trying to be creative. That's different.
And like, so like being as an engineer, you kind of have to be enthusiastic about what the artist is doing. You have to push them. You have to be like, whoa, that was really dope. Like, I really like that. I like what you did on that one line. Like, you could try that on that whole 4 bars or something, like that vibe of how your voice was, or the rasp or whatever, you know? You want to encourage them. And that kind of gets them pumped up and excited, like, you know? And that gets back to like when you're just recording yourself and you're just kind of in your head and you're like, oh man, I don't know if this sounds good. I don't know if this sounds good. But if you have an engineer that's like actually listening to what you're doing, and they're like, yo, that's dope. That's really dope. It gives you the confidence. And then I feel like confidence on the microphone really shows, you know? Like, you could be like really shy on the microphone and no one's going to want to listen to you. It's the same thing like when you public speak. If you're just like, hi guys, it's like no one's going to listen. Everyone's going to turn around and start doing their own thing. Yeah. So, but if you're like, yo, what's up guys? How you doing? Everyone's like, oh, who's this guy? Same thing on the mic, you know? Confidence is key.
I find that when new artists come and they're like starting to rap, they're not as confident. So you almost
For sure. You got to boost their confidence.
Yes,
Literally.
And a lot of times I try to point out the things that I do like about their
instead of the stuff that they're doing wrong.
correct. But then I also ask, how do you feel about it? How do you feel? What do you think? They're like, because most of the time they kind of know internally, like,
That they're not really okay with it.
right.
And then I've also experienced where people are kind of like scared to be like, oh, can I try it again? Can I try it again? Can I try it again? And they get to like the 10th take and they think that the engineer is kind of getting like sick of it. And they're like, oh man, bro, I'm so sorry. Like, just give me one more. And I'm like, dude, it's fine. Don't be sorry. Like, we're here. We'll do 100 takes if we have to. You know what I mean? So you kind of have to ensure them of that, because Also, like, I think some people have just had bad experiences with other people recording them, you know? Like, if there's someone that was, like, doing that to you when you were rapping, they're like, bro, hurry up. Like, you've done, like, 20 takes. Like, are you done yet? You know what I mean? Like,
I never had that, but that's what that
just
would
imagine
suck.
if you were a dick, you know what I mean?
Like a
it's
bitch.
possible.
Ooh.
Yeah, so be fucking nice, man. Because, I mean, same thing when you make beats with people. Like, if you don't vibe with them, you can't make a beat. It's
true.
like the same way. Like, if we didn't vibe, we wouldn't be doing this podcast.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So that shit's overlooked by a lot of people, honestly. But it's important. So.
And before we move on to the next point, one thing I do add to studio etiquette is that if I know an artist is coming, I would put water bottles on the table for them.
Give them some water, yep.
I won't even let them, they're like, can I get some water? I'm like, oh yeah, they're right there. There's
right
ones up for you.
It's like you're in the Uber, you know?
Correct.
Yeah. I'm working on my tea cart. I'm
that?
gonna build a tea cart in here with like an electric kettle so I can like pour people like tea and have like a selection of tea. Like when you go to the restaurant, you know, it's like pull it out and like take your flavor because tea's good for, you know, loosening up the mucus and singing and rapping and stuff.
Speaking of that, you're saying tea is good, right? Because it's hot. Would you recommend someone drinking something cold if they're gonna sing?
Not most of the time. I mean, obviously it's different for every artist, but I have had singers come in here and they're like, "Oh, let me go get some water," and then they drink some real cold water and their voice is like gone, you know, and it has to like warm up again. So definitely drink some lukewarm room temperature water rather than like if you put the water bottles out, like don't have them refrigerated, you know.
That's right. I don't.
I mean, it depends, you know. If it's a rapper, I don't think it's an issue, but singers for sure.
I like that tea idea though.
Yeah, so I know a lot of artists use throat coat, which is just like it's just like a flavor. I forget what brand it is, but it's a popular tea that a lot of singers use, and it just kind of like coats you in some kind of natural something. I forget what the actual ingredient is, but
Natural's always best.
yeah, makes people sound good. So, yeah, I mean that pretty much covers like etiquette. Like I said, like you know. Be a good person, encourage them, be clean.
Boost their confidence.
Yeah, you know, make them feel comfortable. It's like someone coming to your house. You want to be courteous, you want to be inviting, so and you want them to come back, right? You want a repeat client, so
that's true.
It's very important. Yeah, pretty much covers that.
I would give them an experience, you know, just like a little aside from everything, just a little experience, you know, just a little experience.
Okay, so example of I always like to give this example because my homie Lewis always tells people about this, and I'm like, yeah, I did do that. It's cool. But shout out Lewis King. I've been working with him for maybe 5.5 years. So he came to my old spot. I lived in like Lawndale area, and same thing. I was in a bedroom studio, like it was a way smaller setup, but. I never met him. He was just coming through as a referral from a friend. And I had like a TV screen like on my studio desk, and I put up his last mixtape cover on the TV screen. So when he walked in, the lighting was all cool, and his mixtape cover was on the screen. So he just automatically felt at home, you know? Like he felt like, oh, this is my home base. Like this guy fucks with me. This guy's listening to my music. Like also if someone's coming through, do some research on the artist. Like find some songs that you like. So when they walk in, be like, yo, that song you just released, like that shit was fire. Good job, you know. I'm stoked to do your next project, you know. So, be a fan of the person. It helps to be a fan of them. You work harder if you genuinely fuck with their music. So, definitely, you can have some clients that are more startup and maybe you haven't seen them reach the level that you like your music at, but you kind of see the potential in them. And then have some artists that really inspire you to. Well, after they leave the studio, you're like, man, I'm gonna go work on something because they're good. You know what I mean? So that's tight. And then so getting into being in the studio with people, and a lot of time people like to sit in on mixing sessions. So like the vocabulary and the terminology of like when they're like, because if they're not well versed in engineering, they don't know. They're not gonna be like, oh, go in there and can you bump out like 550 hertz. Like negative 3 dB, and then maybe can you throw a DeEsser on around like 5K or between 5 and 7K? It's like they're not gonna say that. So like for example, like you were just telling me, like what have you heard from clients being like, I want it to sound like this? Like what do they say?
Well, sometimes they're like, I don't know, it just sounds very thin. Like they don't, but they. I don't know. You could go about that in any way. The last time was...
You said smooth, right?
Smooth. Can you make this smooth?
Like smooth out the vocals, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in a sense, you know what that means, but a lot of different factors could come in smoothing out a vocal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So like, what did you like? Did you have to like go back and forth a couple of times with them before you figured out exactly what he meant? Or did you just go try stuff?
When they're in the studio, I couldn't get it because we try to communicate with each other and we're like, man, I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, it gets frustrating.
Right. That sucks because I get frustrated and then they feel like it's their fault that I'm frustrated, but it's like, that I'm trying to help so much that I can't figure it out. I'm like, fuck. Like, they put have the responsibility. They come to me for a reason.
Yep.
And then I'm like, well, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah.
But one day it just kind of clicked in my brain. I think last week when we had this conversation, I'm like, I think it just brewed in my brain like, oh, I think that's what they meant.
Oh, smooth equals. So what did it mean to you?
For me, and I sent them the track back.
Okay.
It was for me, what I did on my DAW, I have the option to split on the transients.
Yep.
The loudest part of the sound wave.
Yep.
So it like splits.
Right when they come in.
Right.
And
all I did was fade in.
A little smooth fade in, yep.
Yeah, so it's kind of like...
A lot of times, like, obviously everyone knows P's and B's, like, produce air, but, like, C's and, like, mouth noises, like, right when they come in, depending on the processing, sometimes they come in, they just seem louder than everything else. Like, it's like... And so sometimes, instead of, like, having the compressor attack time really quick to catch that, you just fade it in, and then you don't have to worry about that. Because, like I said, last week we talked about... Andrew Sheps, like he doesn't use compression. He automates everything. So if there's a sound that's too loud, he's dipping it real quick, bringing it back up. So that's essentially what you're doing there. So good fucking job, dude.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
I feel not accomplished.
I'd have to look on my text messages, but I've gotten mix notes, like pages from people that just make no goddamn sense, you know? And you just take it line by line and you're like, what do they mean by this? Like, especially when they're not in the studio with you and they're just sending you notes. Like, what do they mean by this? You know, and you kind of interpret it the best you can. And, you're going to get notes back. And, I mean, I've worked with people where we go back and forth, 10 times with notes, And we get it, but it takes some time, So, I like to be patient.
Patience is key. I like to ask questions. Like,
ask a lot of questions.
Like, this is exactly what you mean, right? On this part, like, you want this sound. Like, this sound right here. They're like, yeah, that one. And I'm like, got you. I know what you want.
Yep. And sometimes people say stuff that completely is the opposite of what they actually mean. I've had that happen.
How so?
I'm trying to think of examples, but, like, man, I can't even think right now. But I've just had where I'm like, you're trying to accomplish like what you think they're talking about, and then they're like, no, it's like the opposite of that, and you're just like, oh, okay. And then sometimes all it is like just turning the vocal up, or like, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's not necessarily making it thinner or thicker, it's just the volume of things, and a lot of times people don't understand like how important just the fader is,
Yes.
So that's another thing, like get your fade mix sitting nice before you go crazy on the processing,
Like leveling?
Just leveling out, panning, spacing. I would honestly go like leveling out with just faders, panning, and then EQ. And then from there you can start to add processing, Carving out areas for whatever's there, Yeah, that's the best advice I can give at the moment.
At the moment? What would be the number one tip you would give to someone who's just starting out? Like right now, this is like, let's just say this is their first episode they're watching. What is the
Well, go back and listen to the first episode first. Now I'm fine, but no, we really do. But okay, continue.
What would be one tip or one advice that they could just take away right now and just be like...
For like notes and stuff?
Or for anything mixing. Would it be leveling, panning, and EQing first?
Yeah, I think so, because if you skip that step, you're just working backwards, and you're going to end up going back to that step. So, and then I think we talked about it last week, but making mix decisions rationally, but also like dialing them back, But I mean, there are cases where I crank stuff, you know what I mean? Like, be creative. There's no rules. Like, when I went to school, they said, make sure you're not clipping Anywhere in the plugin, anywhere. And for the most part, I follow that.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes clipping sounds tight. You know what I mean?
Like some old analog stuff.
Or even just in the plugin, like clipping the shit. Like if you say you want distortion and you're using distortion plugins and you're just not getting the sound that you want, clip your plugin, clip your EQ, clip your compressor. Like the all knobs in, the all buttons in on the compressors, where they push all the buttons in. And it's just super squash mode, like it just squashes everything,
I kind of get an idea what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, so like, don't be afraid to push it. You're not gonna break anything if you're within the computer. I mean, sending stuff to analog gear, if you push it really hard, you can't break stuff. Like if you're in a nice studio and your needle is literally smacking up against the side of the compressor, I wouldn't do that to a $5,000 compressor. Like, you never know, the needle might just fall off. Those things are old.
When you add distortion, harmonics frequencies, right? They boost some like
for sure, yeah, some
unheard frequencies.
I mean, whatever is pretty much already boosted in the signal, but maybe you don't hear. It's gonna enhance all that. So if you're not cutting those frequencies before you distort, then they're gonna be a problem when you distort. They're gonna come out even more.
So let's say you do that to an 808. And something happens to the 300 hertz, 400 hertz.
Just spikes up all of a sudden.
Sure. Let's just say it does. Would you add a multi-band compressor or how,
I would carve out the EQ first before anything.
EQ first?
Yeah. Because, if it's an unwanted frequency.
Just like unwanted period?
Get rid of it, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's the first step. Because, you said multi-band EQ?
Compressor, multi-band compressor, yeah.
When do you use those sparingly? I honestly really only use... Okay, so multi-band compression is basically you can change the ratio, the threshold, the attack release on different parts of the spectrum, So from 100 hertz to 500 hertz, I'm squashing I'm reducing by 20 dB, like something ridiculous. But then all the other frequencies, I'm only reducing by like 3 dB, Mm-hmm. So you can basically... It's just... very versatile. You can make it the same all the way across, but you can switch it up, Mm-hmm. So if you want to compress your low end a little bit more, I think the main part time that I use that a lot is when I'm mixing like a 2-track. Mm-hmm. Like when someone's coming in just to cut vocals and they don't have the track out of the beat, they just have the instrumental, and a certain frequency is just poking out too much where it's kind of making it hard to mix the vocal. Then you could compress just that vocal range frequency in the beat, compress from like 1K to 5K a little bit harder than the rest of the beat, Like obviously you don't really need to compress the rest of the beat at all. So you could do no compression on all the other frequencies and then just compression on where the vocal sits a little bit more. So just to give it that space.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense. But why not add an EQ? And why a multi-band compressor in that case?
So there's parts in the beat.
Right.
Okay, so say there's a sound in the beat that occupies the space of where the vocal is, but that sound is not in the entire beat. So you don't want to EQ out. Yeah, you don't want to EQ out that frequency if that sound is not playing. You know what I mean?
Facts.
So with the multi-band, you can control, like if that frequency is not there, it's not going to pull it down. It's only when that frequency gets past that threshold that it starts to pull down. So, say it's like just the chorus has this in it. I mean, you could cut it and put it on a different track and then EQ it that way. Or you could just put it on the multi-band compression. And it's not really doing anything the whole track until that chorus comes in. And then it's compressing that vocal range frequency.
Hey.
Right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I've never used multi-band compressors, to be honest.
Multi-band compression is used a lot in mastering.
Mastering. Once you have the whole spectrum.
So the final chain, yeah. And I mean, for the most part, I will do pretty much the same settings on every band. Except for maybe the low end, If the low end is smacking, I'm like, okay, I need to compress this a little bit. Especially like the low lows, like 60 hertz and down.
Ooh.
Like that sub pressure, Like you want that there, but you don't want it swallowing up your whole mix because then your mix won't be loud enough, I mean, how do you find the median between your mix being loud enough and the bass being thick enough? Because that's a battle. That's the battle that everyone puts up with.
I have that battle now. What you mean?
Because if you're not in a room that's mixed right, or your subs or your monitors don't have a lot of low end, then you're going to be like boosting your low end just to compensate. But then once you get in your car's like, you're like, oh shit, okay. Mm-hmm. You're like, why is my mix so low?
My friend actually popped his speakers.
Damn.
His car speakers.
Damn. On your mix?
No. Dude.
I'm about to say, that's an accomplishment. I want to do that. I want to blow someone's speakers out.
I mean, that'd be dope.
Yeah, I'd be pissed, but it'd be tight. But yeah, I mean, you have to take into account, like, Loudness Wars, you know? Like,
Loudness Wars.
Loudness Wars got real bad. They're still real bad.
You think so?
People brick wall their stuff. I mean, we're still getting
wall?
quality.
What do you
brick
mean?
wall limiter. So pretty much when you see, say you get like a track, and it just literally looks like it's just cut off. Like there's no dynamics. It's just a straight line. So we call that like a brick. I'm like, damn, that beats a brick. And that's harder to mix, you know, because there's not really much dynamics, you know. You can't fit stuff in between. But I mean, we're still getting quality stuff. But like talking about like Mike Dean's mixes are very loud. He limits his vocals a lot. So there's a lot of artifacts that come out of limiting too hard. I forget. I mean, obviously, like "Birds in the Trap" "Sing McKnight" by Travis Scott was one of the best mix albums. Obviously, that was a while ago now, but at the time, like that revolutionized like how I wanted my shit to sound.
Really?
Yeah. It was loud.
It was loud.
I referenced things to that. I was like, all right, is my mix loud enough? Let me put it up against, you know, Beebs in the Trap or like something that I knew that was loud. So I'm like, okay, it's loud enough. So always compare, reference your mixes, drop a Travis Scott joint into the session, A/B it, the volume, you know, see if you're close. He doesn't have to be as loud, but you want to be close.
I heard he gets his RMS to like -3 or something. Like not even -6.
He'd be popping. Oh yeah, he'll go -1 on your ass.
Really?
Like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because he masters himself. He just runs it through the Neve Summy mixer. So I've heard him in an interview be like, okay, so he's like, I get my vocals to where I like them, and then I turn it up by like 6 dB, and then I run it through the Neve, and I'm just like, damn, that must be nice. It just sounds good. But he's overdone it too. There was the Honcho Jack album, which was Quavo and Travis Scott. I don't know if you heard that. Those vocals were a little bit too limited for my taste. They were cool. There was parts of them where I was like, damn, that shit sounds fire. But there was also a lot of artifacts and like the mouth noises and stuff that were just enhanced like crazy. And that shit bothers me. Another great legend, Dr. Dre. His shit is crispy as fuck. But the one thing that bothers me about some of his mixing is the same thing. Like he doesn't do that little fade we were talking about. And sometimes you need that when you're crushing through all this outboard gear. Like he's got great gear. So he's got to like do a little fade out on that and get that out of there. Yeah. But I don't know. That doesn't bother a lot of people, but it bothers me. Because it's an easy fix, you know? And I feel like probably once you get to that level, you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to deal with that. My shit sounds good how it is. But that has to do with also how you're recording, you know? When people are straight up on the mic and they're... It's going to be louder, you know? You're putting that sound into the mic. So that has to do with your distance. If you sit in the perfect place for your mic, the sibilance and the like, you don't need to de-ess it as much. The sibilance will sit right, you know? So like again, like I said in the first episode, use your mic placement as your first form of mixing. You know what I mean? So have them get their headphones on, engineer, listen, and be like, back up like a couple inches, you know? And it's hard because some people like to be reading on their phone and moving and stuff, and like, it's cool, you can move a little bit, but you got to keep your mouth in the general vicinity, you know? So, yeah. So, let's see. Other thing we want to talk about. You had some questions about sidechaining last week.
Do you sidechain your vocals to instruments? Like, let's say a guitar is being played the same part. Do you sidechain your vocals so it's like it's subtle?
Yeah. But, I mean, you want to reduce by like a couple dB, yeah. So, you could do that.
Okay.
And, like, what's the difference between sidechaining and multi-band compression?
I know how to use Sidechain. That's it. That's really it. But
so if you think about it, if you're only cutting out, like, because you can sidechain EQ as well, where you're only cutting out certain frequencies when that vocal comes in. So you could do that. You could sidechain, like, when the vocal comes in, I'm cutting out 1 to 5K out of the guitar. So it's like, it just keeps that, it keeps like the fluidity of the track and the dynamics, but it's still like not cutting out so much where it's like, oh, like, it sound like they're turning it down real quick, you know, like when the vocal comes in. So yeah, sidechaining for sure. Obviously, sidechaining bass is the biggest. Yes, you know,
like kick and bass,
kick to your sub, because you want to make that smack. That's if you want your kick to smack. Like, what do you want? Because every track, you know, you got to decide: is it your snare that's gonna smack? Is it your kick that's gonna smack? Is it your 808s that's gonna smack? You can't have all three smack. Because then it's a brick wall. There's no dynamics. You know what I mean? It's like when you're making a beat, like, you can't have a fat kick and a fat snare. I mean, you can, but you probably found it's better to have one that's a little bit fatter than the other. You know? So it's like, oh, I like that snare.
I haven't.
You know?
I have, to be honest, I haven't. I just like having a thick kick and a thick snare.
I mean, you want them both fat, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't know. Picking sounds is really important.
Sound selection.
Like, if you go to mix a beat and the sound selection is just off, there's not really much you can do about it. You got to replace the sound.
So true, man. So many stock plugins sound like toys, or just so like you whatever you add to it, you cannot save it.
Yep. It's layering shit. This is just a random thing that I used to do that my professor taught me. I would drop in an applause track, just like crowd applause, like in like a stadium.
Okay.
And I would put a gate on it, and I would only have the gate open up when the snare hits. So in the snare, so it just makes it sound like the clap is like fucking huge. It just gives it like a slight like sense of reverb, sense of different sound in there. I don't know.
Because the chants occupy the high frequencies, right? Yeah. And you lower it down so it's
crisp.
In the background.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's like way low, but real subtle, you know?
It's subtle, but it makes a huge
Try
difference.
it out. It's fun. I did it on a lot of tracks. I haven't done it in a while, but yeah. Definitely like on like live sounding snares. It's fun. Give it that crack.
I actually don't know what a gate does. Or I've used gates only when once it hits like -48, it just goes zero. Like, you know, like infinite.
So, you know what sidechaining is? Which
do.
is a sidechain compressor.
Yes.
So,
yes.
When the kick hits, the bass ducks down. It's reduced, right?
Correct.
So, in a gate is the same thing, but the opposite. So, when the kick is not hitting, the sound is not coming through at all. It's being reduced an infinite amount. It's off. So think about it. A gate is closed. When that kick hits, the gate opens. So you
that's good.
Open the gates. So you adjust. Yeah. So you adjust your attack and release time. How quick you want the gate to open. How quick you want the gate to close. You know.
Yes.
So, same thing essentially.
I haven't used it as much.
Fuck around with the gate, son.
Just fuck around with the
Open
gates.
the gates. Open the gates. Ah! Ah! Taste buds on my chest.
In his heart.
In my heart, yeah.
His heart inks.
Real heartfelt moment.
Yes. Straight to his stomach.
So yeah, sidechaining, dynamic EQ. We've gone through that. Okay, so you were really big into dynamic compression, and I was saying dynamic limiting. I used a lot more.
Dynamic limiting.
So it's the same thing. Anytime you hear dynamic, it means you can adjust the settings based on the frequency.
Adjust the settings based on the frequency.
Yeah.
Adjust the settings based on the frequency.
So I do. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's say 500 hertz. What, how, what, where, when, how, and shit. I don't know. Give me an example.
So, I dynamically limit a lot of my background vocals.
Limit background vocals. Okay, I'm picturing it. Background
vocals. I want them to sound crispy. I want them to still be full, but not have too much low end in them, because the main vocal is going to have a lot of that low end in it. So I'm limiting like the 500 hertz.
500 hertz.
Harder. I'm ducking my ceiling down and I'm limiting harder on just those frequencies because I want them there, but I want them super controlled. I don't want any dynamics in those. I want them to stay the same the whole time. You know what I mean? Because I don't want them to overtake any other vocals. I want them to sit right in their perfect spot. So I do that a lot. And I'll do it to, you know, I'll de-ess my background vocals, but then I'll limit kind of around that same frequency to bring that like almost like harshness, rasp, like sharp cutting frequencies, you know?
Yeah.
Especially when you're doing like dubs and you're having them go left, right. And you want them really wide and crisp. And I don't know. That's just how I get them. I'm not really sure like where I got that from. I think that was just me fucking around, dropping stuff on. Sounded good. So it's part of my chain.
To people who don't know, what is a DeEsser?
So sibilance in your voice. So like you know when like someone's like whistles out of their tooth. So every time I'm like, what's a Sacramento sarcastically slid? I don't know, a bunch of S words. So all that. So when people are rapping, you know, obviously no one's like too sibilant like in regular life, but again, once you start to put on all this, you know, compression, limiting, it brings all that stuff out, you know, because the sibilance is not as loud. So when you're limiting and compressing, you're making the rest of the signal very loud. So it automatically kind of brings out the sibilance a little bit more too. So sometimes you have to de-ess. So you can literally like, it's kind of like a multi-band EQ, honestly. You can cut out certain frequencies just when they come in. So definitely de-ess. I mean, a lot of times on background vocals, I de-ess like multiple times, you know? I'm grabbing like 2 or 3 different frequencies that I don't like, and I'm de-essing them, you know? And then there's also like de-essers where you can just kind of like cut the whole top off a little bit just when you need to, you know? So you can do like 5K and up. It'll just kind of like a snake.
Like a snake.
Yeah.
Snake. You got a snake.
People de-ess their snares.
Really? That's weird. Oh, but I can see why though.
If it's like a weird hissing that they don't like, you know? Yeah.
I never thought of it. I've been wondering how to get rid of those.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably like multiple things you could do with a de-esser besides just vocals, but that's predominantly where I use it. Waves has a really good de-esser. Honestly, your stock de-esser is probably perfect. Stock Logic de-esser, stock Pro Tools de-esser. Are there stock plugins in Machine?
For de-essers?
I never really dove into like processing in Machine because I would always make the beat in Machine and then drop it into Pro Tools and mix it. But stock stuff, don't overlook it. This let's see, what's his name? Oh, my homie Stephan. He has a really good page where he just puts a lot of useful stuff out there. He has this company called Whole Loops. And he just sells a lot of like plugins and like bundles and like vocal chains pretty much. And he uses a lot of like stock Ableton stuff, and he has a very good point. He's like, don't overlook that stock stuff. Don't think you need all these expensive plugins, you know, like if you know how to use your stock, I would recommend perfecting with your stock plugins before you buy any plugins. Get really good at mixing with basic Pro Tools plugins, basic Logic plugins. And then once you grasp the concept on how to actually use them, then you can go get your waves and your sound toys and your UADs and spend the check, you know what I mean?
Spend the check.
Because why are you going to spend a check if you don't even know how to use it?
Right, it's true. And I think a lot of people come from that mindset where they're like, oh, I need this good EQ, this good compressor.
The number one product I hear that people need, Fab Filter. People are like, oh man, I need that Fab Filter. The Fab Filter sounds nice, sounds good. But you know why people want it? In my opinion,
I don't have it.
It's a great piece of equipment. I don't have it, but I don't need it either. But it works. It doesn't have any weird sound to it. But it's very visually pleasing.
Visually pleasing.
Like you can see the RTA factor. Like you can see the frequencies. You know, you don't have to hear them. You can just look at them. Like that's a big thing for people who don't really have the ears. They want to just see it on the screen and be like, okay, there's a peak at 500 hertz. Let me just pull that down, you know?
Yes.
Which most of the time works, but sometimes just trust your ears, you know? Sometimes you need that peak at 500 hertz. It sounds tight. You pull that out, it's too thin. Like when there's a lot of like mid-rangey like chords and stuff that are really only hitting between like 300 and 600, and it's like if you dip that out, it's like that's the whole sound. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So be careful. Don't go crazy with it. Don't go brazy with it.
Don't go brazy with it.
And I mean, the last thing I have on my list, shout out to Andrew Sheps again, back bus.
Andrew,
you watched that video, right?
Which one?
Like back bus, like parallel compressing.
I've watched him talk about parallel compression.
Tell him what you learned.
Cool. So, so you got a file. You get a sound. You just don't compress that sound on the insert. You send it to a whole different track, and then you compress that, and then mix accordingly. You know, bring up the volume, make it sound good. But his whole thing was not compressing the original because he likes dynamics. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what he did for 99 Problems. By Jay-Z.
But EQ ain't one. No.
But back end compression, what is that? Like you said,
that's what you just said. Back bus, yeah. So parallel, it's the same
totally,
thing,
dude. Totally, I knew that. Come on, bro.
So okay, so it's the same thing.
Come on.
Andrew Sheps put us all onto this. There might have been someone before him, but I learned it from him. Mm-hmm. And once I started implementing it in my mixes, it just sounded way better. So you're parallel compressing. And a lot of people do parallel compression on their drums and on their vocals and stuff like this. But on top of whatever you're doing with that, you're parallel compressing everything. You're sending every sound in that track to one compressor. And then you're pairing that with the whole song. So think of it as like, it's almost like a pre-mastering process. It's like that glue. You're kind of like making the whole song less dynamic and blending it with your dynamic song. So, I mean, my back bus is like, you know, negative 17 dB or like, you know,
squashing
it's turned down. Not necessarily reducing that by that much. You can. It depends. Okay. It depends on what sounds good for each track. Mm-hmm. But you're not using a lot of the signal is all I'm saying. Like, it's just kind of in there. And you can mute it and unmute it. I think I did it for you last week. It's kind of hard to tell, but shit makes a difference, man. And it kind of does a good job of bringing out what is already at the forefront of the mix. Mm-hmm. So it's like in this vocal bridge part, or in this bridge of the song, say there's an electric guitar, and you want that electric guitar to scream. If you're sending everything to that one bus, it's gonna allow that guitar to hit louder and kind of like bring everything else down, but still do it in a sense where it's not just like, oh, that guitar's too loud, you know? It's like giving it that space dynamically. So it's a hard thing to grasp, but once you start fucking with it, it'll be crazy. And now that I heard about it, the very first time I came about it was working with Hassan. There was this guy who mastered a mixtape that I mixed for him. This was in like 2010 or some shit. He mastered the thing 4 times in 4 different ways. Mm-hmm. One like super brick wall squash, and then a couple of variances of that. And then he blended all 4 of those signals together. And that was the final master. I was like, what? But I was like, this shit sounds good. So he was doing some backbussing before I knew what the hell that was.
That's So
I would be interested in experimenting with doing like 4 different backbusses and blending 4 different backbusses together. That would be crazy. I'm gonna do that today.
Yeah. I need to mess with parallel compression more.
Parallel compression is great, man.
I'll do it to everything. That's what it is. Not everything.
I don't either, honestly. A lot of people are like, oh, you gotta parallel compress your vocals. Nah, I don't do that. I backbust my vocals. I don't parallel compress everything. Mm-hmm. I think it's just an easy way to get around things. Like, it just sounds good, but it's like you can do it without it. So you'll do it in the beginning, but then once you get better, it's not as necessary. Mm-hmm. But I do parallel compress my drums always. I want them to smack, you know what I mean? Yeah, so send all your drums to one bus, and then that's where you're smacking. You know, you can be reducing by negative 30, make it sound ridiculously crunchy, and then just blend that signal very low, but blended.
One thing I've been doing to my drum bus is adding an SSL compressor, making a glue, and then do the send.
That glue.
Send parallel compression, then add a little bit of distortion.
Yep.
To that, and just have its own characteristics.
Especially for your snares and hi-hats. It'll make them come out. Make them cut. Yeah. That's cool. What else with drums?
Oh, man, so many with drums. So many things with drums.
Yeah. Any like techniques that you found recently you want to share?
Oh man,
go to.
What can I share with you guys that you guys don't know?
They don't know anything. They're just starting out.
That's true.
Basics.
EQ your kick, right?
Yep.
I would do it with a studio monitor, just because you can kind of hear it better.
That low end, yeah,
for sure. I would EQ kick.
Because the same thing, if your kick is swallowing up all that bottom end, and then you have an 808 that's in that same area, it's like you're not gonna hear it. It's just mud. Clean the mud.
Clean the mud.
That's something we like to say around here. Clean the mud. Yeah, mud's bad.
Mud is bad. What is mud to people who don't know?
You know when you're walking, down a nice path, and your feet are moving real easily, and then you just start to sink. You're falling into this quicksand, and your legs are stuck, and you can't move, and everything's just feels all cluttered, and you get a little claustrophobic. That's that mud. So same thing with frequencies. When there's a lot of different frequencies in the same range, they start to overlap each other, and then it's like your mid-range is crazy, like loud, like, and then that in turn will make your mix not as loud. It'll just drown out everything else. Your vocals won't be cutting through, because vocals, like, important part of vocals, it's hard to say where, but a nice important part to me is like 1K to 7K. Okay. But you can't overlook that 600 hertz, 500 hertz of the vocal too, the warmth. You need that in there. If you take all that out, it's like, sounds too thin,
Which I've done. Yeah. I fucked up.
Yeah.
Fucked up.
And it depends on what monitors you're listening on too, So you might think it sounds good, and then you take it to the car and you're like, wow, that's thin as fuck.
And how important are monitors? Like a lot of people talk about the Yamaha.
I think it goes back to the studio vibes.
Studio vibes.
It's important for the vibes.
Correct.
I mixed a lot of stuff on headphones throughout my career. But it's just nice to hear things on different sound systems. So even if you don't have monitors, if you have like computer speakers, if you have a boom box with the aux cable, like your car, your phone, different sets of headphones, just listen on different things, because you never know what people are going to listen to. AirPods now are a big thing. Like if it doesn't sound good on AirPods, there's a lot of people listening on AirPods. So just check your sources. So yeah, monitors aren't that important, but if you want the bass to hit, if you want the music to be loud in the studio, because artists like it to be real loud, get the sub, get that shit booming. Yeah. They're however important you think they are. If they get you mixing better, get them.
I've heard your mixes. You know one thing I like about your mixes? Your reverb.
I fuck with reverb. Reverb is like essential. That's one thing I don't fuck with about a lot of other people's music. Right. People don't use reverb. I'm like, it's so nice. Why would you not use reverb? Like, and I mean, I guess the industry standard stuff, like there's not a lot of reverb in it, But like, I don't know, like the Travis Scott, like Mike Dean loves reverb. Like, I'm just like, ooh, I love that sound of that reverb. It's crispy and shit. So
reverb's sexy.
Man.
She's looking good.
I finally got my Lexicon 480L working now that I got the satellite. That shit's fire.
What is that?
That's so it's modeled after like this popular reverb box that would be found on a lot of like consoles and old studios. And it just has a fuck ton of nice ass presets in it, and you can adjust from there, but it's sexy. It's big sounding.
Sexy.
Yeah.
Sexy reverb.
And
looking all wet.
Also like whoa, he's getting sexual.
Play, bro.
Hey man, some people get turned on by this mixing shit, you know what I'm saying? Is that you? No. But I also like plate reverbs. I fuck with plate reverbs. For drums, room reverbs are huge. Because you want it to sound like it was recorded in a room.
I think we talked about this last
week. In a nice sounding room, yeah. You don't want it to just sound like it was just created in the deadest room ever. Like, it's just not alive,
Yeah.
So room reverbs on your drums, plate reverbs on your vocals, even your snare sometimes.
Ooh.
Because I'll put a room reverb on the drums and then put an additional reverb on the snare.
Of course, yeah.
So it's like, got a little pop to it. If the song calls for it. Plates on the vocals, sometimes rooms on the vocals, halls on the vocals.
Explain that. What's the difference between halls, plates, rooms?
Okay, so go back to... Do you know how reverbs were used back in the day, like before they were digital?
Before they would put the sound in a room, right?
Yeah.
With,
So
like, glass
the best example is Capitol Records right here in Hollywood. They have underneath their parking lot, they have chambers, concrete rooms underneath.
Sick.
With a microphone on one end and a speaker on the other. And they have it all wired where you're up in the studio and you send that sound down to that chamber underground. So I'm sending my vocal through that speaker, and then there's a microphone in the room capturing it. And depending on how far away that microphone is, how big the room is, that's the settings on the reverb. So that's essentially what it's doing. So room reverb is in a room. Plate reverb is a metal plate, and you're shooting a speaker at the metal plate, and that metal plate is vibrating. And that's the plate reverb, you know? Hall reverb, bigger room, big auditorium, church reverbs. It's in a church, you know? Altiverb is a really nice plugin where it literally emulates popular like concert venues, and like, you know, you can put your vocal in Red Rocks in Colorado and it'll sound like that because they went there and they did the calculation of what that room sounds like. So that's tight.
Shout out to Math.
I use that for a lot. Yeah, Math is tight. We actually had to, when I went to school, we had to make our own reverb response time and calculate it, and we would use the stairwells at school, and we would make our own and run it through this program. So then like we have like, oh, I can run it through my stairwell at school even when I'm not at school, you know what I mean?
That's so cool, dude.
Yeah,
that's
fucking
cool.
Crazy. Yeah.
I didn't even know if Capitol Records had that. You said underneath
the parking lot. Yep. I'm not sure if they still use it. I think they do, but not as many, I think. But shit's crazy.
I didn't even know that's how it was done. They just send it down there.
Yeah.
And bring it.
So that's the thing. Everything that's on a laptop now at one time was like a piece of equipment or like some thought out mathematical thing. Like, did you know how the flanger started?
Not at all.
So the flanger was created back in the day. They used to record music onto tape, directly onto tape.
Okay.
You know that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So the Beatles were recording directly on a tape, and somebody accidentally put their hand on the tape as it was recording, so they bent the tape down a little bit, and that created a flange.
Ah.
And they were like, they accidentally did it, and they were like, oh, that sounds kind of tight. So then when they re-recorded, they had somebody literally playing the tape, like putting a little bit of pressure on the tape.
I didn't know that.
It's crazy, right?
That's cool.
Fun facts with Gates.
Fun facts with Gates.
This is the type of shit you learn in school, though. Like, they just tell you this cool shit, and you're just like, oh, fun fact, you know?
It's funny because I didn't know any of that up until now.
Yeah, I learned all that from SBC. Shout out my professor, Dave Greenberg. He's a beast. Sonopod mastering. If you need some good shit, go to him. Mastering. I would recommend don't mix and master the track if you can. If there's somebody else that can master that you trust, send it to them. Multiple ears on it. Or if your mix is fire and you love it, and it's a project that you really believe in, go to a real mastering engineer. It's like I master, but I master like I have some outboard gear, but for the most part I'm mastering in the box. You go to a real mastering engineer, they're in this room that has all these knobs that like even I don't really know about, because mastering is just a whole other thing, like spectrum analysis and like all over the place. And a lot of mastering engineers have been mixing for 30, 40 years. So like it's like imagine what I know now compared to what you know, and then imagine someone 10 years ahead of me, someone 10 years ahead of that person, someone 10 years ahead of that person. Think about how much they know. Shit never stops.
Golly.
Yeah. So just keep doing this shit. That's why I figure like if I do this for the next 25 years, like I'm gonna be good. There's no way I'm not gonna be good unless I, lose my hearing or some shit. Goddamn. Knock on some wood.
The ear is the most important asset.
Protect your ears. You're going to concerts, get some earplugs. Don't stand right in front of the speakers and blow your ears out. You're going to need those. You might not feel it now, but when you're 30, 40, 50, your ears start going, you're going to be like, damn, I should have wore earplugs.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of raves and those and then like all that in front of the speaker.
The bass is just shaking your chest. The high end, those hi-hats are just, ears are bleeding.
Shit is still ringing after the event. You're in the hotel room, it's still ringing. You're like,
that's how you know it was too loud. It's that ear fatigue.
Protect your ears.
Yeah, because getting back, we said, mixing around like 80 dB. I think anything over, Apple has a thing now, it'll tell you, like, once you get over like 90 dB for more than like 45 minutes, you're causing damage.
Really?
Because there's certain frequencies, like, you know, obviously over 120 will cause damage like instantly. But even like 90 to 100 for an extended amount of time will cause damage. So that's why when you're mixing or you're listening to a beat real loud for like an hour straight and then you turn it down, you're like, damn, tired.
You feel tired. Like, you feel physically tired. Like, God.
Your eardrums are like, yo, back off, please.
What would you recommend at that moment?
Go outside and listen to nothing. Meditate, you know.
Would you come back to it the same day or just tomorrow?
You can come back the same day, yeah. As long as you're not going at it for too long. But a lot of times when I'm doing sessions for like 8-10 hours a day, man, it comes to a point where I'm just like, I can't mix anymore. Like, if I'm doing like 4 or 5 songs for a person and we're getting through them all, first one mix easy, second one mix easy, third one a little bit harder to mix, fourth one a little bit harder to mix, and then we're like on the last one and it's like 2 a.m. and I'm like, bro, I'm gonna mix this tomorrow because like my ears are I just can't right now, you know.
And on top of that, I'm sure your brain's tired too.
Brain, yeah. Don't make final mix decisions tired as shit. I'm
tired right now.
He's tired.
That's why I haven't been talking.
I'm tired. I got coffee. I cheated.
Cheater. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, man. There's no cheating in mixing. But yeah, I mean, I think that was a great episode. I think we covered a lot of things. If anyone out there is listening and they have like specific questions you guys want us to go over, you know, drop it in the comments. We'll go over it next week.
Yes, drop them in the comments, and also comment the biggest lesson you learned today.
Yeah, you learned something, let us know, you know. We want to know that we're helping you guys out. So yeah, thanks for rocking with us. DJ Gates, open the gates.
Rob.